Understanding Judaism and Zionism, thanks to Israel SHAHAK's book, is Jewish History, Jewish Religion, Chapter 4, The Weight of History, Anti-Jewish Persecutions. During the whole period of classical Judaism, Jews were often subjected to persecutions. Note: during the preceding period, persecutions of Jews were rare. This is true of the Roman Empire, even after serious Jewish rebellions. Gibbon is correct in praising the liberality of Antoninus Pius and Marcus Aurelius to Jews, so soon after the major Bar Kokhba rebellion of 132-135 AD. End of note. And this fact now serves as the main argument of the apologists of the Jewish religion with its anti-Gentile laws, and especially of Zionism. Of course, the Nazi extermination of 5 to 6 million European Jews is supposed to be the crowning argument in that line. We must therefore consider this phenomenon and its contemporary aspect. This is particularly important in view of the fact that the descendants of the Jews of pre-1795 Poland, often called East European Jews, are opposed to Jews from the German cultural domain of the early 19th century, including the present Austria, Bohemia, and Moravia, now wield predominant political power in Israel, as well as in the Jewish communities in the USA and other English-speaking countries. And because of their particular past history, this mode of thinking is especially entrenched among them, much more than among other Jews. We must first draw a sharp distinction between the persecutions of Jews during the classical period, on the one hand, and the Nazi extermination on the other. The former were popular movements coming from below, whereas the latter was inspired, organized, and carried out from above, indeed by state officials. Such acts as the Nazi state-organized extermination are relatively rare in human history, although other cases do exist. The extermination of the Tasmanians and several other colonial peoples, for example. Moreover, the Nazis intended to wipe out other peoples besides the Jews. Gypsies were exterminated like Jews, and the extermination of Slavs was well underway, with the systematic massacre of millions of civilians and prisoners of war. Of millions. However, it is the recurrent persecution of Jews in so many countries during the classical period which is the model and the excuse for the Zionist politicians in their persecution of the Palestinians, as well as the argument used by apologists of Judaism in general, and it is this phenomenon which we consider now. It must be pointed out that in all the worst anti-Jewish persecutions, that is, where Jews were killed, the ruling elite, the emperor and the pope, the kings, the higher aristocracy, and the upper clergy were always on the side of the Jews. The latter's enemies belonged to the more oppressed and exploited classes, and those close to them in daily life and interests, such as the friars of the mendicant orders. Note: this fact, easily ascertainable by examination of the details of each persecution, is not remarked upon by most general historians in recent times. An honorable exception is Hugh Trevor Rapper, The Rise of Christian Europe. Thames and Hudson, London, 1965, page 173 and 74. Trevor Rapper is also one of the very few modern historians who mention the predominant Jewish role in the early medieval slave trade between Christian and pagan Europe and the Muslim world, page 90-93. In order to promote this abomination, which I have no space to discuss here, Maimonides allowed Jews, in the name of the Jewish religion, to abduct Gentile children into slavery, and his opinion was no doubt acted upon or reflected contemporary practice. End of note. It is true that in most, but I think not in all cases, members of the elite defended the Jews neither out of considerations of humanity or because of sympathy to the Jews as such, but for the type of reason used generally by rulers in justification of their interests. The fact that the Jews were useful and profitable to them, defense of law and order, hatred of the lower classes, and fear that anti-Jewish riots might develop into general popular rebellion. Still, the fact remains that they did defend the Jews. For this reason, all the massacres of Jews during the classical period were part of a peasant rebellion or other popular movements at times when the government was, for some reason, especially weak. This is true even in the partly exceptional case of Tsarist Russia. The Tsarist government, acting surreptitiously through its secret police, did promote pogroms, but it did so only when it was particularly weak. After the assassination of Alexander II in 1981, and in the period immediately before and after the 1905 revolution, and even then took care to contain the breakdown of law and order. During the time of its greatest strength, for example under Nicholas I, or in the latter part of the reign of Alexander III, when the opposition had been smashed, pogroms were not tolerated by the Tsarist regime, although legal discrimination against Jews was intensified.